again, everyone. I've had a couple of requests to compare broad or bold nibs on various fountain pens, and I wasn't sure I had enough to do a comparison, but I was actually quite surprised when I went back and looked through my pens how many I had with a bold nib. So I'm going to go ahead and write with all of these so you can see the differences. Some of these have had nibs swapped out. I would say, let's see, I think, well, we'll talk about them when we get to them, but I think there's actually quite a few that have had nibs swapped in. So I'll talk about them as I get to them. So I will go ahead and talk about which pens these are, and then I'll go ahead and start writing. So this is a Conklin Duragraph, and this does actually have a non-Conklin nib on it. I have a Leonardo bold nib on here. And this pen has been kind of problematic. I have not found the best combination. I'm not a huge fan of Conklin. This is the only Conklin I have, and I have not purchased any more just because it was just okay. This is actually the third nib that I've put on this pen. The original nib was just a medium nib from Conklin. I wasn't that crazy about it. And then I put on a Duraflex nib, which I really wasn't crazy about. And now it has this Leonardo bold nib. So you'll see how that is. And then this is a Twisby 580 in the purple color. And this actually, I just recently swapped in the bold nib that I had. I think this is the pen that I originally ordered with a bold nib. It's either this one or the green one. And then I took it off because at the time I felt like it was too bold for my liking. But I've since swapped that back in. I actually think I have a little bit of ink that was still left in that nib. I cleaned it out, but you know, it's never perfect. So I think what I have in here is, it's either Neko Yanagi or another sailor sort of lighter colored ink, but it may not look like that when I write with it. So this is just a regular Twisby Eco with a broad nib, and I did actually end up smoothing this nib with micro mesh. I have done a little bit of fiddling with the micro mesh, and it's been relatively successful, so I'm pretty happy with that. And whoever gave the advice to instead of do like little curlicues on the micro mesh and instead write your name, that actually made a huge difference for me. I started with the little squiggly lines and that just really wasn't doing much. But when I started writing my name on the micro mesh, it actually started doing pretty well. So anybody who hasn't heard that tip and is going to dabble in smoothing nibs with micro mesh, that seems to work a little bit better. At least it did for me. Okay, and this is the Visconti Breeze, and I'm going to put a link down below to my prior video where I talked about the Visconti Breeze. I have since changed out this nib. So the original Visconti nib was just okay. It was also bold. I've replaced it with a bold Schmidt nib, which I got from Jet Pens, and it's been a huge improvement. And I'll see, it's still a pretty big gusher. it uses ink quite a bit, but you'll see it's much smoother than the original nib, but I still have that other nib in case I want to try my hand at smoothing that one as well. And this is a Bennu Euphoria in the, I believe this is the Bora Bora color. And this came with a bold nib, and I have left it on there. I haven't taken it off yet. The bold nib is really the only one that I haven't fallen in love with as far as the nibs on the Bennu, but you'll see, and you can make your own conclusions. So this is a Lamy Studio in, I forget the blue color, I think it might be Imperial Blue. And this originally came with a steel nib. I don't even think it was bold, but I have since replaced it with a bold Lamy nib that's gold that I purchased secondhand for pretty inexpensively. And that required some smoothing as well, and it might still need some smoothing, so we'll see. And then this is a regular Lamy. What model is this? I'm always forgetting what model this is. But anyway, it is a Lamy pen with a steel broad nib. So it'll be kind of interesting. You can see the difference between a gold and a steel nib. I think pretty much everything else, yeah, everything else is a steel nib. This is the only one that is a gold broad. And I've definitely found that with broad nibs, you can end up with baby's bottom, which I've talked about before. Basically, you have a little bit, if you look at the nib head on, you have a little bit of a curving in, like a baby's bottom. It looks like a baby's bottom. And that kind of messes with ink flow. I think that the Leonardo nib suffers from that a little bit. That might be the only one. This one maybe, the gold nib maybe. The rest are pretty much fine, but it does seem like it is a little bit more frequent on the bold nibs. Now before I test these, I did want to show you a writing sample of another bold nib, which I've since swapped out, so I don't have it on that pen anymore. So this here is all written with an Opus 88 broad nib. And I've since switched out that nib, and I didn't really want to switch it back for this video. So, sorry, of course my computer always wants to do updates when I'm working on it. But I wanted to show you the quality of writing, and I might pull this out again at the end so you can kind of compare to the other nibs here. There wasn't anything necessarily wrong with it. I just felt like, especially on this new Tomoe River paper, which this notebook is, it was dragging a little bit, and since I was using Tomoe River paper, the new one, fairly frequently, I kind of wanted to switch it out. Oh, and I can sort of show you another contrast here. So this, which I'm going to write with, the Bennu Euphoria Bora Bora with the bold nib, I had iced cookie in it from Monteverde, and that ink definitely was problematic. It caused some hard starts. That's why I only wrote a small little section here with it. It caused hard starts, but when I've switched out the ink, no more problems with hard starts, at least. We'll see. We'll see what happens today. Okay, so I'll open that up again at the end to show you a comparison. But in the meantime, okay, I'm going to put these off to the side here, and I'm going to keep them in kind of the same order here. And I will zoom in so you can see. And I will also put the paper up to the camera so that you can see that later. And I don't remember all of the inks that I have in these, so I may not be able to tell you what each ink is. But, okay, so this is the, let's see, so this is the Conklin Duragraph with a, you can see here, so this is one thing that has happened with this Leonardo nib, which makes me think it might have a little bit of baby's bottom, is because sometimes I'll get this sort of railroading here. I can go back and fill it in, but it does that occasionally. So this is a bold Leonardo nib. So it's just been okay, this nib. And I think that my issues with this nib are truly related to the nib and not necessarily the pen itself, although I have had issues with the pen. So you can kind of see it's a little bit bulbous on the end. Different broads look a little different. So I'll show you each of them fairly close up here. So this nib I purchased from the Nibgrinder, I believe. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's the Nibgrinder. He tuned and smoothed this nib before I got it, supposedly, but it still is a little problematic. I got another Leonardo nib at the same time that wasn't as problematic, but it was it wasn't a broad. It was a thinner nib. Okay, so let's go ahead and go on to the Twisby Diamond 580. So this is the Twisby Diamond 580 purple, forget the exact color name, and this is with a bold nib. And these are really easy to swap in and out, especially if you don't have a special treatment on the nib. Like for the rose gold version, obviously you might not necessarily want to swap it out with another nib from another pen, but they're really easy to swap out because this grip section will come off and you can put it onto the new nib very easily. So you can see this one is not quite as bulbous as the Leonardo. Okay. And then this is the Twisby Eco. And this one has been a little bit, not necessarily scratchy, but like not the smoothest broad nib. Twisby Eco in cement gray with a bold nib. So that's the nib that came with it. I also have a lighter ink in here. I think I might have Troublemaker Petrichor. I think that might be what's in there. And then we're going to move on to the Visconti Breeze. And like I said, I'm going to put a link to the old video, well, not old, but my prior video where I did a little bit of a review with this, with the original nib. I wasn't that crazy about it. This Schmid nib is fantastic. Super smooth. Visconti Breeze with a Schmidt broad nib. And the broad nib by Schmidt actually just screwed right into the housing. So, actually not the housing. So it came with a nib and housing as a solid unit from Jet Pens, and I just unscrewed the old nib and screwed this one in. I did not have to pull it out of the housing, is what I meant to say. And so I'm not sure if it's the nib, but I think that this pen has a very wet flow, so that's what you're getting there. And then we're going to move on to the Bennu. So this is the Bennu Euphoria. It's a lovely nib. Bennu Euphoria, Bora Bora, with the original broad nib. And I believe that this is Steel Blue by Diamine that is in here. Okay, and then here's this gold one by Lamy, which I've had a little bit of trouble with. So this is a Lamy Studio. But like I said, I have smoothed it, so I think it's gotten a little better. And I think it's the Imperial Blue. And as you can see, or maybe you can or can't, this nib is very bouncy. You can see there's that little bit of railroading type thing here with gold broad nib. And I think that this is a Robert Oster ink. It might be Carbon Fire, but I'm not quite sure. So this bold nib definitely has a little bit of bounce, as you can see here. Gold nibs are almost always softer than steel nibs. It's quite bulbous. And it seems like the more bulbous the nib is, the more you could potentially get a baby's bottom issue. But when it works well, it works well, and then sometimes it doesn't. So this is the Lamy with a steel broad nib. Lamy, oh, I think it's the logo. I think that's what this is. Lamy logo with steel broad nib. And this is a lovely steel nib. You can tell it's not as bulbous as the gold one was, but it's still pretty bulbous. Okay. And then I'm going to show you this writing again. Oh, where'd it go? There we go. And so this is the Opus 88 broad nib here. And they're all fairly similar. I would say the only one that is probably a little bit out of, not necessarily out of whack, but is a little bit different is this one has a lot of ink flow, this Visconti, so that's what you're getting there. But other than that, they're all fairly similar in line weight. Okay. Well, that's all I had for you today. If you have any questions, feel free to ask below. I think in this Lamy logo, it is a Lamy blue cartridge. It might be the turquoise cartridge that I have in there, but looks like I went with mostly blue here for all of these. But if you have any questions about these bold nibs or, you know, anything really, feel free to ask below and I'll get to it when I can. In the meantime, I hope you have a great day. Feel free to subscribe to keep track of future videos on my channel. I hope to see you next time. All right, bye.